Hello and welcome back to Neo Psychology with me, your teacher, Mr. Neo, the channel I teach online psychology lessons for my wonderful students. Today we are carrying on with the attachment unit and we're looking at lesson 3, the role of the father. Let's get started. We all have attachment figures in our lives, some of which may be male, some female. Female attachment figures, mothers, grandmothers, sisters, are suggested to be more nurturing, whereas male attachment figures like fathers, grandfathers, brothers are suggested to be more playful. When you are sad, do you typically look for support from a male attachment figure or a female attachment figure in your life? Have a little think about that one. Right, we've got 2 learning objectives today. Show comprehension and apply knowledge of the role of the father. And then 2, to be able to discuss and evaluate the role of the father. We're going to look at 3 pieces of key research today looking at the role of the father. In your attachment booklets, please make some notes. Let's get started on learning objective 1, the role of the father. One of the important questions attachment research has to answer concerns who infants become attached to. Most attachment research has focused on mother and baby attachment, and the role of the father in the development of attachment has often been neglected. There's a gender bias. However, there is research on the specific roles that fathers play in development. Now note that the father does not specially refer to a baby's biological male parent. It refers to a child's closest male caregiver. So this is about what male caregivers may contribute. This could be a stepfather, it could be an uncle, it could be a brother, for example. Right, let's have a look at Schaefer and Emerson's research into attachment to fathers. Perhaps the most basic question about the role of fathers is whether babies actually attach to them, and, if so, when. Available evidence suggests that fathers are much less likely to become babies' first attachment figure compared to mothers. So this was research we had a look at last lesson, and they found that the majority of the time the mother was the primary attachment figure. For example, stages of attachment based on research by Schaefer and Emerson found that the majority of babies first become attached to their mother at around 7 months, and in only 3% of cases the father was the first sole object of attachment. In 27% of cases the father was the joint first object of attachment with the mother. So in only 3% of cases the father was the sole object of attachment. That's very low, right? But bear in mind that was in 1964. Has percentage of fathers being the primary attachment figure changed? Maybe, maybe not. We're not sure. It's likely that it's slightly higher, but I would still say that the mother, the majority of the time, is the primary first sole object of attachment. However, it appears that most fathers go on to become important attachment figures. 75% of the babies studied by Schaefer and Emerson formed an attachment with their father by the age of 18 months. This was determined by the fact that the babies protested when their fathers walked away. What's it called? This type of protest when their father walked away? Separation anxiety, okay? And this is a sign of attachment. So you can see by the age of 18 months, that is the multiple attachment stage identified by Schaefer and Emerson from 1 year onwards, when they start to form more than one attachment. And they found that in the majority, in 75% of cases, the babies did form an attachment with the father identified through separation anxiety. So that was Schaefer and Emerson. Let's have a look at Grossman in 2002. Distinctive role of fathers. So how important are fathers in children's development, and do they have a distinct role? Grossman carried out a longitudinal study. That's a study conducted over a long period of time. So sometimes research might go on for many years, following the same person throughout their childhood, throughout their adulthood, and that is known as a longitudinal study. So Grossman carried out a longitudinal study looking at both parents' behaviour and its relationship to the quality of children's attachment into their teens. Quality of infant attachment with mothers, but not fathers, was related to children's attachment in adolescence, suggesting that fathers' attachment was less important. So, what does that mean? What does any of this mean? What it's saying is, the quality of the attachment with the mother was an indicator on how their attachments will be in adolescence. But the father, the attachment of the father was not indicative of any future attachment styles. So it's almost saying that the father's role is less important than the mother's role in terms of looking at attachments. However, the quality of father's play with infants was related to the quality of adolescent attachments. So it's saying that fathers have a different role in attachment, one that is more to do with play and stimulation and less to do with nurturing. So instead of having a look at the father's attachment, they had a look at the father's role, and they found that this quality of play was more important for adolescent attachments. And that was according to Grossman in 2002. Field as well also did some research looking at fathers as primary caregivers. Field in 1978. There is some evidence to suggest that when fathers do take on the role of being the main caregiver, they adopt behaviours that have in the past been associated with mothers. Tiffany Field filmed 4-month-old babies in face-to-face interaction with primary caregiver mothers, secondary caregiver fathers, and primary caregiver fathers. Primary caregiver fathers, like mothers, spent more time smiling, imitating, and holding hands than secondary caregiver fathers. So, we've got different roles here, okay? We've got mothers who are the primary caregivers, we've got fathers who are the primary caregivers, and fathers who are the secondary caregivers, okay? And what they found was, if the father was the primary caregiver, they would take on more roles that were identified to be more motherly traits. Like they found that those primary caregiver fathers were more smiley, more imitating, which is related to interactional synchrony, maybe holding hands more or holding infants. This behaviour of smiling, imitating and holding infants appears to be important in building an attachment with the infant. So, it seems that fathers can be the more nurturing attachment figure. The key to the attachment relationship is the level of responsiveness, not the gender of the parent. So it shows that, according to Field in 1978, fathers can take on a more nurturing role if they are the primary attachment figure. Right, I've got an application question here. Application is AO2. We're going to apply our knowledge to a real life scenario. Let's have a look at Boris. Research into the role of the father in attachment has allowed psychologists to advise parents about their children's development. Boris is the father of a 9-month-old girl, Emily. Boris has noticed that recently when Emily is distressed, she only accepts comfort from her mother. This upsets him and leaves him feeling unimportant as a parent. Here's the question. Referring to research into the role of the father, what could you tell Boris about his role in Emily's developing attachments? Okay, give yourself 5 minutes, answer the question, think about key terminology, think about the research, answer it, pause the video, give it a go, please. Otherwise, let's have a look at the answer. Referring to research into the role of the fathers, what could you tell Boris about his role in Emily's developing attachments? Boris's situation is very common because most children go through a stage of only accepting comfort from a single caregiver who is often their mother. This can leave fathers feeling rejected and excluded from the mother-infant relationship. We could tell Boris that Emily's behaviour is normal and that it does not mean that she is not attaching to him. We could also cheer him up by telling him about Grossman's research showing that fathers have a different role in children's developing attachment, and his role is to play with little Emily, so he is important. So he has a different role. And that is the role of the father. It's not too complicated, and there's not that much research looking into it, okay? Identify one thing you've learned about the role of the father. What's one thing you've learned? Progress. Why do you think learning about the role of the father is important? Why is this important? It's not just to pass exams. Why is this information important? How does the role of the father apply in real life? You know, who might this information be useful to, right? How can we use this to our advantage? Do you have any more questions? And there we go. That's learning objective 1. Show comprehension and apply knowledge of the role of the father. I'm done it. We've done it. I'm ticking it off. Huzzah! Learning objective 2. To be able to discuss and evaluate the role of the father. Right, how are we going to evaluate this? Right. What are some of the strengths and limitations of the role of the father? You're in the exam. They give you the question. Evaluate research looking into the role of the father, 5 marks. You're thinking, oh, right, it says evaluate. That's only AO3 content. I can't remember anything. What are you going to come up with? Come up with your evaluation. Can you think of any strengths? Can you think of any limitations of this research? Think about it. Otherwise, let's have a look what I got. Inconsistent findings on fathers. Research into the role of fathers in attachment is confusing because different researchers are interested in different research questions. On one hand, some psychologists are interested in understanding the role fathers have as secondary caregiver, secondary attachment figures, whereas others are more concerned with the father as primary attachment figures. The former have tended to see fathers behaving differently from mothers and having a distinct role. The latter have tended to find that fathers can take on a maternal role. This is a problem because it means psychologists cannot easily answer a simple question the layperson often asks. What is the role of the father? There are inconsistent findings on the father because depending on the father, they take on different roles. So it's difficult to differentiate between those two. This is a limitation. Let's have a look at another one. If fathers have a distinct role, why aren't children without fathers different? Right. The study by Grossman found that fathers as secondary attachment figures had an important role in their children's development. However, other studies, like McCallan and Glumbach in 2004, have found that children growing up in a single or same-sex parent families do not develop any differently from those in two-parent heterosexual families. This would seem to suggest that the father's role as a secondary attachment figure is not important. So, this is another limitation, right? It's saying that, well, those people that grow up without fathers, it might be single-sex parents. You could have two lesbian parents, 2 female parents, or in single-sex parents where you've got just your mother, single mother, taking care of the children. These people don't grow up necessarily differently to those that grow up with a father. So this would suggest that the role's father is less important, right? Is that the case? It's really difficult to know. And then the final evaluative point is this one. Why don't fathers generally become primary attachments? The fact that fathers tend not to become the primary attachment figure could simply be the result of traditional gender roles, in which women are expected to be more caring and nurturing than men. Therefore, fathers simply don't feel they should act that way. On the other hand, it could be that female hormones, such as estrogen, create higher levels of nurturing, and therefore women are biologically predisposed to be the primary attachment figure, according to Taylor et al. in 2000. So it's a nature-nurture debate here, okay? Is it in their nature, women to be more nurturing and less in the nature of men? Or is it nurture? Is it to do with environmental factors that make you more of a father or less of a father? So there we go. Why don't fathers generally become primary attachment figures? It depends if you're looking at it from the nature or nurture perspective. And there we go. Evaluation task. Summarize each evaluative point into exactly 10 words. Try and remember what those evaluative points are. Summarize them, thinking hard, okay? Challenge. Can you think of any further criticisms of your own using Grave or Scout? If you're not sure what that is, have a look in your booklets, right? It's a way of helping you learn how to evaluate. Give yourself 5 minutes. Summarize each evaluative point. Give that a go. Otherwise, we're going to move on. Right, that's the evaluation of the role of the father, okay? Have you learned something from this evaluation? Why is it important? Who is this useful to? And there we go. Learning objective 2, to be able to discuss and evaluate the role of the father. Can I tick it off? Yes, you can. Right, plenary. I've got a couple multiple choice questions for us. Let's give them a go. Number 1. Which of the following activities is more common in fathers than mothers? A. Smiling. B. Holding. C. Imitating. D. Playing. What's the answer? D. Well, actually, the answer is depending on whether they're primary or secondary attachment figures. If it's a primary caregiver father, they've been found to smile, hold, and imitate more. But typically, the answer is playing. And then number 2, which of these is a strength of research looking into early interactions? A, it is a socially sensitive topic. B, it is easy to interpret infant behavior. C, controlled observations capture fine detail. Or D, observations tell us the functions of behavior. Right, something being essentially socially sensitive is not a strength. It's not very easy to easily interpret infant behavior. We don't know necessarily what these interactions mean. Observations tell us the functions of behavior, not necessarily, but with controlled observations you can capture fine details, and that is a strength. And there we go. That was today's lesson. That was lesson 3, the role of the father. Next lesson is lesson 4, animal studies, and we're going to start with Lorenz's research in 1935. And there we go. Well done, my neuropsychologist. Good work today. I hope you found that useful. Tune in next time for lesson 4. I've been Mr. Neo. God bless and peace.
I'm feeling like Will. I feel like a prince. I'm feeling myself. I'm loaded with bills. Cause I wasn't blessed with no Uncle Phil. Don't know how it feels. I wanted to flex. They told me to chill. I'm making a flip. My life is a flick. Now load up the film.